Hello and welcome to this course about test-driven development with Node.js. My name is Başar Büyükkahraman. In this course, we will be building a fully functional backend service with Express.js. We will call our application as Hoxify. While building this application, we will learn how we can build a RESTful web service with Express.js with all necessary functionalities like validation, internationalization, static resource serving, caching, JSON manipulation, and interacting with external services. And we will see how we can handle database operations with ORM package of sequelize, and we will see how we can manage database version history and migrations. And while doing that, we will see how test-driven development works and how it is affecting our code quality and reusability and how it is giving us the confidence about refactoring our implementation. Also, we will deploy our application to Heroku and we will create an instance in Google Cloud and deploy our application to it. And also, we will automate all this deployment process with GitHub Actions. This course is purely built on practice. You will be learning by doing it. Each code piece we write will be for our actual application implementation. In each section, we will gradually build our application. We will not jump ahead and add a functionality not needed for that moment. We will implement one requirement at a time. Each implementation will bring the next requirement to us. And following this practice will help you to get a solid foundation about overall REST web services requirements and how to implement one of them with Node.js by following test-driven development methodology. Now, let's see how Hoxify is working. We are going to build a backend application, but to get a better understanding about all the requirements from user point of view, you will find a web client shared with this course. Now let's demonstrate the functionalities with this client. In this application, we will have users and the users will be posting hoaxes. And let's go over the functionalities one by one. So we have this sign up page, and in the sign up we will be filling the form with the username, email and the password. And if user already have an account, it is going to be redirected to this login page. And if user forgets the password, we will be providing password reset functionality. Now let's start with the sign up. So when we try to sign up with an existing user, let's say user1, we have this user and its email address, user1 mail.com, and the password. Let's send the sign up. And we will be receiving this email in use validation. By the way, our application, both the client and the backend, is supporting the internationalization. So if we switch the language and retry the request, our backend will be responding message according to the selected language. So let's sign up with a non-existing user. Let's say our user is user 100 and the user 100 mail is this one and the password is this one. Now let's split the screen to show this web client and our application console. So here on the right hand side, our application is running. Now sending a sign up request. And we get this message, an account activation email is sent to this user 100. And we have this URL printed out in the console logs of the application. Let's copy this one and open this URL. And here we have an email from our application for this user 100. And here it says, please click below link to activate your account. And let's click this. And here we are going back to our web application and it is saying that your account is activated now. And we can log in with this user. But let's say if we forget our password, then we will be posting our user 100 at mail.com. Again, it is saying that check your email for resetting password, and we have another URL right here. Let's copy this one and opening the page, and this is for the password reset, and clicking this reset, and we are getting this page for resetting our password. Then we can just fill with new password, and your password is updated. Page will be redirected to login page. Then we will be able to log in with this user. So let's log in with this user 100 mail.com password. Now we are logged in, and let's close the other tabs. We no longer need them. And we have this user listing functionality, and we are listing the users with pagination. So we can go to next page or previous page, and we can see the users like this. We can go to our user profile and edit our user. So let's say we will change our username. Let's say user 100. And we can also choose file for our user. Let's select this one and save it. And our user is updated now. Now let's log out with this user. Let's log in with another one. Let's go with user 1. And when we logged in, this users list is not containing the logged in user. Express checking the authentication fields, and for this user listing case, we are just excluding the logged in user from that list. And let's go edit our user once again. Let's say user 1 updated, and we have this profile picture for this user. And let's submit a hoax with this user. So hello world. And also we can submit hoaxes with attachments. So like this one, we can add files to our hoaxes. So sending this one, and if we refresh our page, we see the hoax. Or we can go to our page, users page, and list the hoaxes for that user. And let's log out with this user and log in with user 2. And let's update this one too. User 2 updated. And let's choose a profile picture like this. And let's go to hoax submit. Hello world 2, and this one is also sending a hoax with an attachment. Sending it, refreshing the page, and here we see the hoaxes are listed. And if I go to my profile page, I see my hoaxes, and if I go to user 1, I see hoaxes of that user. And we have this delete functionality for the hoaxes. If we have this hoax, we have the option to delete it, and for the others we don't have that option. Also, we have the delete functionality here in the account part. By the way, this client is showing this conditionally, like the delete operation. For instance, in the hoaxes or in the user profile page. For this one, we don't have the delete button, but for my profile, we have this delete my account. But in the backend part, we are handling these requests based on the authorization coming in the request. So even we are limiting the user actions right here on this client. In fact, anyone can send the corresponding REST requests to delete this hoax, for instance. But our backend is properly implemented to handle such cases, like rejecting those requests. If user is not authorized to delete something, we will be returning corresponding error back to the user. So like this one, we can just send a delete and the hoax is gone. And also the attachments are gone from our storage. And let's log out with this user and log in with this user 1 once again. And if we go to my profile and delete my account, in this one, both the user and that user's hoaxes, and if hoax attachments, those attachments are also removed from our application. So that is how the application is working. And we will be building this application with test-driven development. So let's show the final result. Stopping the application, and I'm going to run the test with coverage mode. Normally, coverage does not mean anything in terms of the quality of your test. It is showing how many lines of your actual application code is being run through the tests, but again, it is not reflecting the quality of your tests. So let's run px_jest with this coverage. Jest is our test tool. We are going to use Jest for running the tests, and this coverage is an option to also generate the coverage report for us. So hitting enter, and here is the result. We have this much of tests and all of them are passing. And if we look at the report, our test code coverage is around this one, and that's it. We are going to be doing our implementation by adding our tests first. We will start with writing our test code, then we will be implementing the corresponding functionality, and you will see the benefits of test-driven development throughout the course, and hopefully this course will help you to embrace this methodology for your software development practices. We are not just going to be doing the implementation in our local environment and leaving it like that. We will be deploying our application to Heroku, and also we will be deploying our application to Google Cloud VMs. And also we will be automating whole deployment process with GitHub Actions. So we are not just going to practice the application development, but we will also see the practice of actual production environment requirements for any application. So if you are ready, let's start building this application. For this course, we will be installing a couple of applications to our workstation. And the first one is Node.js. We will be developing our application with this JavaScript runtime environment. And it is coming with npm. Node Package Manager. We will use npm to install packages and run our application scripts. Even we will be automating our tests. To visualize our request response output, we will use Postman. This is a very popular HTTP test tool. In our application, we will be using SQLite database. This will be easing up our development and test environment. To visualize the content of our database, we will use DB browser for SQLite. And we will also use PostgreSQL to demonstrate how easily we can point our application to that database. And for that, we need to install pgadmin to our machine. For code editor, we will use Visual Studio Code. And we will use a couple of extensions. One of them is this ESLint for linting feedbacks. And the other one is this Prettier. This is for having a consistent code format in our application. And the other one is SQLite. Again, this is for visualizing the SQLite tables, but it is not very robust while I was recording this course. We will make a practice of deploying our application to Heroku, and that requires Git version control system. So even you are not using as your daily software development practice, now it is required you to use to deploy your application to Heroku. And finally, we will be connecting to an actual server, and for that we need an SSH client, and for Windows we need a client like Putty. And here is the download links. Please install these applications to follow the course. We will follow test-driven development methodology in this course. This means we will write our test code before implementing the requirement. Test-driven development, the TDD, will be guiding us to clarify what we are implementing and how we are implementing it. It has a cycle of red, green, refactor phases. In the red phase, we will be laying out the requirement with the test code we are writing. There is no implementation for passing that test at that moment. Then, we implement the code that does the requirement. We run the tests and see if our implementation is passing the test or not. If we are passing, then we complete green phase. Then, for refactor phase, we can change our implementation until we satisfy without breaking existing functionality. These three steps are letting us to be aware what we are implementing, to make sure that our new implementation will not break our previous tests, and to write clean and reusable code. Now let's create our project. In our project folder, I'm running npm init. This is going to be asking us a couple of questions, and we will be giving responses. So it is asking what is the package name. Let's call it Express Web Service and version 1.0. And let's say TDD with Express for the description. And it's asking what is our entry point. And we will have, let's say, app.js. And it is asking our test comment, but we will add it later. And looking for Git repository, for now skipping it and skipping the keywords. And you can type author name as yourself. I will be writing my name here. And the license part. So it is basically generating a file, package.json, with format like this. So it's asking if this is okay, and we hit enter for yes. Now we have the package.json. Let's open the project in Visual Studio Code now. Here is the package.json we created. Now we are going to install dependencies to build our application. Main dependency is this Express. We are going to build our application based on Express. And we will install it with, again, running on terminal. At the folder where the package.json is, we run npm install Express. So this will be downloading the dependency for the Express, and it will be adding it to our package.json. So let's confirm it here. Here we have Express here in the dependencies part of this package.json. Now let's create our initially entry point module. Let's call it app.js. And let's create a simple Express application. For that, first we get the Express from the Express package we just installed. Then we create an app like this, and we tell app to listen. This is taking two parameters. The first one is the port that it's going to be listening. So I'm going to set it as 3000. And the second parameter is the callback function. When the application is successfully initiated, then it's going to be calling this callback. So here defining an arrow function. And let's say, let's log to our console that app is running. So saving this, we can run this application again, opening the console here, running it via node and the JavaScript module name app. So here we see the app is running. And if we go, let's say, to this browser, and if we type localhost 3000, here we are receiving this response. For now, there is nothing in our Express application, so by default it is returning back this response. Alternatively, we can run this application with a script we define in package.json. So let's stop this one with Ctrl+C. Then here in package.json, just like this test one, we will have, let's say, start. And this one is going to be the command we typed in the console, node app. So we keep both of them here. Again, saving. And this time I'm going to run npm run start. So here we see our app is running. For start script, we don't have to use the run part. Instead of running npm run start, we can run npm start. So the app is running. Now we will also need a couple more dependencies. We are going to do a test-driven development, and for that we will need a test runner. We will use jest for that. So let's install it. Running npm install --save -dev. This is a development dependency, so installing it like this and telling jest. Now let's update our test script here in package.json. Here we can see the jest is added to this dev dependencies part. Now we can update our test to running the jest, and we want jest to be running actively, which means whenever we do changes in our code, jest will be automatically picking up those changes and rerun the tests. So we will be continuously receiving feedbacks while we are developing our application. To do that, we are going to add --watch parameter. But this is going to fail. Let's see, this is going to fail npm run test, or just like the start case, we can run this test script via npm test. So running it. So it is trying to find the test modules, then keep on in watch mode, but it is failing because the project we just created is not a Git repository right at the moment. And watch functionality is trying to figure out the differences between each commit and then decides which test to be run. So that's why it's failing. Alternatively, we can use watch all, which means it's going to run all tests. So it's not going to check the commits, Git commits, and it's just going to find the test modules and run them all. We will be keeping track our application with the Git, so we will be replacing this part with watch. So let's do that here. Anything a Git repository here. So reverting it back to watch and running the tests one more time. So this one is now in a Git repository, and then just does not complain anything about it and tries to run the test. And here we see no tests found related to the files changed since last commit. So there's nothing to run. We have one more final dependency to install, and that is the super test. This is for initializing the Express application in test environment and running the HTTP requests against that application. So we are going to again install this package with npm install. Again, this is going to be a development package, so adding --save dev, and our package name is super test. Now we have the fundamental dependencies added to our project. To have standard code style and to have assistance from our editor for catching problems early, let's add a couple of more dependencies. Our first dependency is a popular library called as ESLint. It will be helping us to have consistent coding throughout the project. So let's install it. Again, this is going to be a development dependency. And the package name is ESLint. Now we are going to add configuration for ESLint, and here in this ESLint page it tells us there are two possibilities for configuration. One of them is the ESLint RC file, and the other one is putting the configuration into package.json with the field of ESLint config. We will do this one. So here in package.json, adding ESLint config, our first property for this configuration is to define parser options. We define what is the ECMA version. ECMA version is the standard which the JavaScript is based on. So we are going to use ECMA version 6. So it will be running linting against this version. Then we want to use some predefined rules coming with the ESLint. So we tell that we want it to be extending the, and for this one we can pass an array. And we want this to be extending the ESLint recommended rules. Then we define at which environment we are developing our code. And this is going to be Node environment. And also it's going to be ES6. And also we are using the jest as a test runner, and it is coming with some global functions. So we want ESLint to be aware of it. So we tell we are also running jest. And then we can define rules here. And let's say one of the rules would be the semicolon after each line is a must, and we want to see a warning if you don't use semicolon. So we tell semicolon is a warning. If semicolon is not used, then we will get the warning. And for, let's say, quotes, we want the quotes to be single quote. If it's not, then we are going to see a warning. So for that one, we will set the value in array, and we will see a warning, and it's going to be a single. So saving this one, in Visual Studio Code, there is this extension, this ESLint extension. If you have this one, then if we go to our app.js, here you will see these linting errors. Here it says this must be in single quotes. So if we just change it, then the warning for that line will be gone. But we will not do that manually. Instead, we are going to use another library for that, the Prettier. We are going to install Prettier. Also, we are going to integrate the Prettier with ESLint. So it is describing how to integrate the Prettier with it. So we will do that now. So installing the Prettier this time. So running npm install. Again, this is a development dependency, and we will install Prettier. But in single install command, we are not limited to install just one package. We can install multiple. So let's install the other packages that will be needed for integrating with ESLint. So we will have ESLint config prettier, and the next one is ESLint plugin prettier. So all of them are installed. Again, we have an extension for prettier for the Visual Studio Code. This one provides some functionalities like formatting code automatically for us, and we will use that functionality. So let's configure ESLint to work with the prettier. We are going to add prettier to this extend part. It is plugin prettier / recommended, and also we will add plugin, and this will be prettier plugin. We can also configure prettier here, just like adding ESLint config. We can add configuration for prettier, and just like defining rules we see here, we can define prettier rules like single quote to be true. So if you run prettier, it's going to replace double quotes with single quote automatically. Now we don't need to define the rules here, because by default adding the semicolons automatically. Saving this one and opening the app.js. Now we have two warnings. One of them is coming from our ESLint, the other one is coming from prettier. So let's, for now, pass just an empty object, saving it. And here we have the warning just coming from the prettier. Now, to fix that, we can run our extensions capability. To do that, we hit Ctrl-Shift-P to get this command input place. Then we can find the format document, and it's going to replace the double quotes with single quotes. I'm just undoing this to show one more thing. As you can see, this is underlining with red line, but before we had the prettier in ESLint config, we told it to be warning. So we can override this prettier behavior like this one. We can say prettier / prettier, so that is pointing to this part, prettier / prettier, to be, let's say, warning, and saving it. Now we see warning instead of error. Now let's try something else. Let's first fix this part. Warnings are gone. And let's make this line a bit longer. Let's add a couple of more characters. And here we see another warning. And this warning is coming from ESLint, coming with the prettier rule. It's not liking the length of this line. By default, it is expecting 80 characters to be in this line. But let's change it to something bigger. Let's say our print width, that's the parameter, and here you see the default value. Let's set it to 120, saving it and getting back to app.js, and now the warning is gone. By the way, if you are using Windows, then you may be seeing a warning like the end of lines are being shown as warning. By default, prettier is looking for, let's find the parameter here, end of line. The default is the LF, so it is looking for just /n, the common Linux macOS line end. But if you are running Windows, it is possible to be CRLF. you might be seeing that warning. To be consistent, let's continue to use as line ending the LFs. You can change line endings in VS Code with Ctrl+Shift+P and change end of line sequence, and you can switch from LF to CR LF. Also, you can set it as a setting here. In the settings section, you can find the end of line here, the files AOL to be the /n. So if you just save it like this, you will be automatically having, whenever you hit enter, it's going to be \n. And let's add one more rule here for the ESLint part. We are going to use triple equality, and this is this parameter. So we are going to use triple equal whenever possible. So we want us to be warned if we are not using this one. So saving it. Now with the prettier, our editor is not allowing us to save a file like this one. Let's do this way. Let's replace the single quotes with double quotes, and we are going to save the file without formatting. So we have this warning. We can also have a script like start and test. Let's add one more script here. Let's call it lint, and in this script we can just run ESLint in this directory. So it will be running from our root directory, and it will continue to go deeper to the nested folders. So saving it, let's run this in console. npm run lint. So it is scanning the modules. Then here we see the warnings. Now we can also fix these warnings by running. As you can see, it is saying you can run with the --fix option. So it's going to be something like this. The fix ESLint.fix. But when we are trying to pass an argument via this npm script, we have to add 2 dashes, then add a space, then we pass the option. So let's hit this one. So here you can see it is running ESLint with the fix option. Now let's run ESLint once again. Now the warnings must be gone. Here we see warnings are gone. And when we open the app.js, here we see the double quotes are gone. Now let's add one more dependency to our project. We are running our test in watch mode, which means whenever anything changes, the tests will automatically run. We will also do the same thing for our application running behavior. So we will use a library called as nodemon. So let's call npm install save dev nodemon. So this is installed. Now let's split the screen to this terminal and the editor. So here, instead of, let's resize this. Now instead of calling the application with node app, let's replace the node part with nodemon. And let's, in console, let's run npm start. So here we see the application is initialized through this nodemon package. Now when we come here and change anything, let's say app is running, and here we see the application is automatically restarted. Now we have completed the basics of our application dependencies and the packages. We will add a couple of more dependencies, but to make sense why we are using them, we will install when we need them. We will be building a web service, a backend application, but to understand it more clearly from user point of view, I'm sharing a basic client with this course. So let's run this client. For that, we are going to use the npx. This should be coming with npm package manager. If not, then you can install it like pm install-g npx. So if you don't have it, please install this way. So what we are going to do is we run npx and we will be running HTTP server. By the way, beware, we are at the folder where our index.html is. Okay, so we will run HTTP server and we will pass a couple of parameters to this one. First of all, it is by default caching the static files. We don't want that. So for that, we add -c-1 and let's run it on specific port with the -p parameter, and as a port, I'm going to use 8080. And we want this client request to be proxied to our actual Express backend. To do that, we are going to add another parameter with -P, uppercase P, and we will be pointing this one to http:// localhost, and the colon port is 3000. This is the port where my app is running. So if we hit enter, this is going to be installing the HTTP server if it is not already in your machine. And then it's going to print out these interfaces that you can access to it. So if you open the browser and hit localhost 8080, it's going to be returning back to us this application, this index.html. We have this login page, sign up page, and also you may be realizing that there is this flags, there is translation. So you can just add your translation if you like. So here in this locales, there is English and the Turkish, and in this file, supported languages, you can just edit it. I'm opening here. You can add your language. You can replace this tr1 with your language. And here, this is a free API that is just providing country flags. So you can just find your one. Here, there are lots of flags here. You can use your country flag. And so if you just, let's say you want to add German version, you set the language as DE and flag part with the DE also. Then if you just refresh it, you will see the German flag. So it's not going to mean anything right now because it's trying to find the translations for the DE, but let's display it here. So it tries to get the translation for this locales DE translations to German version, but it doesn't find it because it's not there. So it is failing to translate it. So what you need to do is to add a folder just like this one. Let's say copying this one, adding DE, and opening this file, and changing here with the corresponding translations. So that's how you can add your own translations to this client application. So we will be implementing the functionalities step by step, and you will see failures for the not implemented ones, so let's not care about them. So we will have just sign up. or we will have this login, and we will have the forget password parts. So we will do them step by step. So this client will be useful to visually make sense about what we are actually building. Because when you are just focusing to the backend, it might not be always clear about what is the actual user flow. To understand the user requirements and to see how it's going to be used by a real user, then that will lead us to think about what are the requirements on the backend side for that particular service. So I will be using sometimes this one. Sometimes I'm going to use the Postman for sending REST requests. Consider this one just for a test client. Now let's start implementing the sign-up functionality. So remember, we are doing test-driven development, so we are going to start our implementation with writing our test first. So first, we are going to create our tests folder. Double underscore tests and again double underscore. Jest is automatically picking up this folder when it's trying to find out where the test files. So we are going to put the test files under this folder. Now let's run npm test. So we have seen this one, it's running in watch mode, but since there is no test yet, it's just printing this logout. Now let's create our first test module. For test module names, there is a required naming convention for Jest to find them. It is either ends with .spec.js or ends with test.js. The spec is for defining the specification of the scenario, so that's why I prefer this one against the test. So here in this one, we are going to test the user register. We will define the specification of the user registration. So as soon as we add this file, Jest is trying to run it, but it is failing because it says there is no test suite in it. Let's add our test function. Again, we have two options to define a test function. One of them is to add test, or the other one is it. And again, I'm going to use this one because with this way we type it, then we describe what is the test about. For the first test, it is our application. It refers to our application for me. So it returns 200 okay when sign up request is valid. So this is our test description. And for our actual test, we will pass a second parameter, the test function here. So it's going to be an arrow function again. And in this one, we are going to initialize our application and we will send the REST request to it. To initialize the application, we need the library request. We will call it as a request, and we will require the library we installed, supertest. So we are going to request, and this is looking for the application. So we will pass app as a parameter to this one, but first we have to go to our app.js and export this from this module first so that we can import in the test module. So going back to test module and here getting the app from the one directory above. We are in the tests folder, going above, and here it is app module. We are requesting app, and then we will chain a couple more functions to this one this is the super test functionality, we are going to send a sign-up request. So we will be sending some data. For the RESTful services, when you are sending a data to backend, you should be using the post method if you are sending it for the first time. So if you are sending something for creation, then you should be sending it with post method. And we will be sending our request to an endpoint. Naming of this endpoint should be aligned with our entity, our object. So we are going to send a user object. So our endpoint should be something like this, user. But REST is suggesting you to use plural namings instead of singular ones. So we are going to send our request to /users. And also, it's good practice to have API in somewhere in the path. And also, the version of the API. So like API 10 users would be fine. So we will be posting data to this endpoint. And the data will be sent in a JSON format. So let's create a JSON object here with valid user request in it. So what is a valid user request? It will have a username. So let's say it's user1, and it will have email. Let's say user1mail.com, and there will be password. And let's say password will be something like something uppercase and a number and a lowercase, let's say some character long like this one. So we have these warnings coming with the prettier. We can just get rid of them with just calling format document, so it is shaping out better. Now we are sending a request, but we are looking for a result to make sure this test is testing actually. So in the end, we expect to receive 200 OK. Again, warning because of the format, so running format document. So the test is ready. Let's save this. Test is passing, but we didn't do anything about it. It shouldn't be passing. So we will get back to it, but let's focus to this part. We have this warning. It's complaining about this console log because the test is already ended, but it's trying to print out this log. We are initializing the application when we are importing this module, but in our test, we don't need it to be running in listening mode. So what we should do here is, let's add another module. Let's call it index.js. Now, as soon as we add a new file to our project, Jest is detecting it and running the tests again. And we see this failure address already in use. And the reason of this failure is when we run our test for the first time, we run the app in listening mode, and it is using the port 3000. And when Jest tries to run the tests again, where we initialize the app once more, and it is failing with this address in use error. So other than the unnecessary console log we see in our previous test result, the main problem coming with the current implementation is it is breaking our test watch functionality. So let's move this app listening mode to index.js. And in index.js, let's get the app from our app module, and instead of running this listen here, let's run the listen here, formatting the document, and now saving this one. After our changes, tests are running automatically again, but this time the test is crashing. You may not have seen this issue, or maybe you have seen this crash in the previous step. This instability is triggered with this port usage. Now we have extracted the app listen functionality from app.js, so we will not face this port issue anymore in our tests. Let's run the test again. So now the warning is gone because our app is not in this module, it's not in listening mode anymore. We are running the app in index.js, and let's also update our package.json to start the application not from the app module but the index module. So saving this one, also killing this test console and see if the application is going to be initialized. So running npm start, and here we see app is running. So index.js is properly initializing the app in listening mode. Now let's go back to our test again. Now the warning about the console log is gone with these changes. Now what we are going to do is, we shouldn't be receiving 200 OK for this case. The test is passing because our expect is not actually waiting test to be done. This expect is asynchronous, so test is finishing without an error before we get this assertion part. To tell the test runner just that we are waiting for an asynchronous action to be done, we take the done as a parameter for this test function, and we will pass it to this expect as second parameter. So saving it. Now we see the failure. Now instead of receiving 200 OK, we got 404 not found. So let's fix this. We are going to create a route handler here. So for this application, we will be handling the post request, and we will be processing the request going to API 10 users, and we will have a function to handle this request. Let's define it here. This function takes two parameters. One is the request rec, and the other one is the response. And what we are going to do is return a response. Return response, and we can just send an empty response back. This is by default going to be returning 200 OK. So let's save this. So here we see test is working. To make sure that our implementation is doing something, let's change the status to something, let's say 500. And here we see we are receiving 500 instead of 200 OK. So our implementation is working. So for the assertion part, we have alternatives like coming with jest. So let's use that. So this is an asynchronous action. It is sending a request to backend and waiting a result. So we can wait for the result here by adding, so commenting this expect part out, by adding this then function as a parameter. We are going to define a function, and this function will be called with the response object, and we expect, this is the expect function coming with the jest, not part of the super test, response status code to be 200 OK. And again we call done to tell jest we are done. So again, formatting, saving test. This one is also passing. Now let's add one more test. It's always good practice to send a response body back to client to be descriptive about what has been done. We can do this check in this test, but it's not good practice to do multiple assertions in a test. So adding a copy of this test. Copying it and pasting here. And this time it returns success message when sign up request is valid. So this time we expect the response to have a body, and this body will have a message property, and it will be, let's say, user created. So this is failing because we are not sending a response body back. So what we are going to do here is just adding a body object to this send function. So we will have a message property and we will have user created for it. Now the test is passing. So we completed our first tests. In this test module, we can organize and group tests with another function. It's called as describe. And just like the test functions, we can provide description for the describe function. So as first parameter, we can say this is user registration. And for the second parameter, it will take the function again, and in this function we can add the test functions in it. So moving it inside this part. Again, saving this one, and in test console we see this is user registration tests, and we also see the descriptions of each test. Now, before finishing this up, let's change the structure of our code a bit. Now let's keep the index.js in the root folder, but let's create a folder as src and moving this app.js in it. So our tests failed because the relative path is updated but it's not saved. Saving it, and we see all tests are passing. Now we are going to save the user to database. For that, we are going to use another library. It is sequelize. This is an ORM library, which means we will have object definition on our code, but this will be handling the database connections and corresponding table creations and necessary SQL queries for us. So we are going to install this one, but also we are going to use SQLite for our development. So we will install both sequelize and SQLite 3. So going back to our console, running npm install sequelize and SQLite 3. Now let's create a folder under source. Let's call it config. And here in this config, there will be database connection functionality. So adding the module database.js. Now we are going to use sequelize, and we will require it with sequelize. Then we are going to create our own sequelize instance. Let's give lowercase sequelize name to our instance, and it's going to be new sequelize. Now we are going to provide a couple of parameters to this one. The first one is the database name. Let's call it Hoxify. This is our client application name. And the next parameter is the username. Let's say it is my DB user. And the third parameter is the DB password. Let's say it's something like this one. We are going to connect to SQLite, so it doesn't really matter what we are setting here. If you would be connecting to something like PostgreSQL or MySQL, we will be adding the real user and password for those databases. And the fourth parameter is an object. And in this one, we will set the dialect. And we are going to be using SQLite. And we are going to store the database, the SQLite database. So we define the storage. It will be stored in the root directory of our application. And let's call it as database SQLite. And let's export this sequelize instance we have here. So we created our database connection instance. Now let's define our model, the user object. So here under src, creating another folder, let's call it user. And in this user folder, creating the module user.js. This will be our sequelize model instance. And that is actually the definition of our table in the database, and also the object, the JSON, we will be passing for the user object. We will define the user, so we will first, again, get the sequelize with the uppercase, the library one. Sequelize. And the other one is our own sequelize instance. And we will require it from one folder up, config, and database. Now we are going to create the model. So first, let's get the model as a variable like this, sequelize model. And we will have a class of user extending model. So this is the basic structure of a sequelize model. Then we will call user object initialize method. It is coming with this model. And in this one, the first object, this is going to be object attributes, and the second one is the option. So this is the attributes and this is the options. We will provide both of them. For attributes, we will have a username field. And this field will have a type. And the type of this field will be string. Then we will have email field. Again, this one will be also string. And finally, we will have password field. Again, this will be also string. So we have defined the attributes. Then, for the options object, we will pass our own sequelize instance. Then we also set the model name, which is for our table name. We will set it as user, and we will export this user model from this module. So we have database connection module and we have user model instance. Now we are ready to add our tests. Again, going back to user register spec. Now we are going to add one more test. Again, copying this one. And in this one, it saves the user to database. So again, we are posting this user object to backend. Then, this time we don't need to do anything about the response, so removing that one. And Instead, what we are going to do is query the user table, and here we will query user table, and then we will do assertions based on that result. So what we are going to do is import the user model to this test module. It's under src user. So here we will run user. There are built-in functionalities like find all, find one. This time let's find all. Let's run find all. Again, this is an asynchronous function, so we will get the result with the then function, and it will be providing us the user list, and in this then we will do our assertions. So we expect this user list length to be 1 because we inserted a user, and moving this done inside here so that after these async operations we will tell just that we are done. So we are ready, but we are not running the test. So here, running the test in console. For now, all tests must be working, but you will not see the test results because I'm committing each changes in each these parts. So it's not finding any difference. So that's why we don't see the test results. So I'm hitting letter A to run all tests without checking the Git commits. So our tests are passing. So now I'm saving our third test. And here we see a failure in this test. And also we have this warning saying that no such table users. By the way, this is looking for users. We are telling this is user, but by default, sequelize is generating a plural name for this table. So that's fine. That's not the problem. The problem is the database is not created yet. So when we try to run a query against this database, since the tables are not created, it's throwing this error. To fix this, we need to initialize the database. So what we are going to do is we will get the sequelize instance we created in our src config database, and we will initialize the database. In each test, we will be interacting with the database. So instead of initializing the database in each of these tests, we can use a just functionality. We can call a function of before all. This is a function of jest, and this will be run before any of the tests are run. So we will call before all, and we will provide a callback function for this one, and in this function we will be calling sequelize sync. So this will be initializing the database, but again this is an async operation, so we return it back. So jest will be waiting for sync operation to be done. Then after this before all ends, it will be running our tests. Saving again. Now our test is failing. Here we see we are expecting here in this one, we were expecting user list length to be 1, but we received 0. So again, this is an expected behavior because we are not actually saving anything to database. So what we are going to do is in app.js, we were just returning a response like this one. But now we need to save user to database. So first we need to get our user model from user, and we will call user create. This is looking for an object, and this will be user object, and we are sending it in post request, so it is coming to this function in this request object, and we can access the object request body. So this request body is actually the object we are sending here. So we get the object and we tell our model to create it. So this will be saving it to database. Again, this is an asynchronous call. So if it successfully saved, it will be calling this then function back. And here we can return the success response back, saving it. Now the test is failing again. Let's check it one more time. Here we see we were expecting it to be 1, but this time we received 3. Why is it happening? Because we have 2 more tests doing the same thing. So we are also adding these users, even they are all identical, we are still inserting them to database. So that's why we are seeing this table to be increased in each test. For a solution, we have to make sure we are having a clean database. So each of these tests must be running an isolated, reliable environment. So the other test shouldn't be affecting the condition it is running at. So we must have a DB with a predictable state. So for this one, we will do another before operation. And this one is before each. So this will be called before each tests to be run by jest. Again, we are passing our callback function. And in this one, we are going to return, again, this is going to be an async operation, so that's why we are returning it. We will return user to destroy the table with the parameter of truncate true. So this will be cleaning the user table before each test. So even this one adds something to it. Before this test to run, it's going to be cleared by this before each function. So saving it. Now we see all tests are passing. Now let's add one more test. Again, copying this one. In this test, we will check which fields are written to database. So it saves the username and email to database. We will check the password later. For now, username and email check is fine. So after finding the users, we will get the first one. There's only one user here, so we get the saved user with user list first item. And we expect saved username to be this one, user1. We are sending this one, and we expect saved user email to be user1@mail.com. So saving it. Again, this test is failing because we are receiving a null as a response. Now let's open the database. Here we have this database SQLite, which is initialized here with this sequelize instance. For opening the database, we can use either the plugin, the extension here, the SQLite, this one, or there is another application, DB browser for SQLite. So either option is fine. So here in opening the Explorer part, I'm going to use the VS Code extension for opening the database. So first let's maximize this screen and Ctrl-Shift-P and SQLite open database. It detects the database SQLite here, this one, and here SQLite Explorer is visible here. And when we here click this icon, it's running the query, and we see the user table is like this one. So the username, email, password fields are null. And this is happening because the request body here is not parsed properly. To parse the incoming request body as JSON, we need to configure it. There is this library called as body parser. If you check some Express application codes, you may be seeing it to be used there, but we are not going to use this one. Instead, we are going to use JSON parser middleware coming with the Express 4.16. So let's use it. All we have to do is just call app use with express JSON. So before saving this one, let's close this screen. Let's close the database and back to split screen. Now saving this one. And here we see all tests are passing. So we are storing the data properly in the database. Let's also check the database one more time. To see how is it looking. So we have the user, password, email, all stored here. And we have these created add and updated add fields. And these are automatically added by sequelize. And this primary key is also automatically added. These date fields are for auditing. We can use them or we can ask sequelize not to create them. But for user object, it's fine. And also here in the console, we see lots of logs about the sequelize. Let's just disable it. We don't need this much log to be printed out. So here in our sequelize instance creation part, we say logging to be false. So clear output, and we see the tests are still passing. Let's also do a manual test. Let's make sure we are initializing the database. So in index.js, let's get the sequelize instance, require src config database, and we are going to call sequelize sync. Now killing the test console, running our application. By the way, we moved the app to src folder, but our editor didn't update it this way. So updating it to src app. So that's why we have this error. Now the application is working. And for testing, we can use Postman or our own client here running our application. And opening on browser, going to the sign up page, and let's write user1 at mail.com, password, and sending sign up request, and we receive 200 OK back. And also we see in these logs here the post is properly sent to backend. Now also we can verify in this SQLite database in user table. Again, full screen. Here we have the user object. Let's add one more. User2 at mail.com, password. So here again running the query, and here we see the user is added to database. So we are storing the user in database. Now in SQLite we are storing the password as clean text, and this is not something we should be doing. If we store a user password, we must store it in hashed version, not the clean text version. If someone access to our database, they shouldn't be seeing this password like this one. So we are going to hash it. So adding our test. So in this one, it hashes the password in database. Again, we will have the done, and let's copy this part. Now we are going to check the password of this saved user not to be the password we are setting for it. So stopping the application and running the test, saving it. So this one is failing here, failing with the object equality. We expected it not to be password, but it is. So that's why it is failing. By the way, this is printing out lots of logs here because of this structure. Actually, we are running our tests in this promises, and in this then function we are not handling the catch block. We have another promise here, and we are not handling the catch block either. So it is failing at this step and throwing an exception, and actually it is trying to find the catch block here, but since we are not implementing it, in the end it is printing out something like this. To make sure our test is properly working, we can just change it to B, not remove the not part, and check the equality. We see it is properly working, but that's not what we are looking for. We expect this password not to be this password. So let's fix this. We are going to hash the password, and we will use the bcrypt hashing algorithm. We will use this bcrypt library. So here it is showing how to install or how to hash the passwords. So here, this is how we are going to hash it. So first we have to install this one. Killing the test console, running npm install bcrypt. So let's run the tests again, and we are going to implement the bcrypt hashing. Opening the app.js. Now let's get the bcrypt from our bcrypt dependency. Now we are going to call bcrypt hash function, and this is going to be an asynchronous one. We will hash the user password, so we will get it from request body password. As a second parameter, we are going to provide a round. So let's see the samples here. The salt round is something like this. If the number goes higher, the possibility of the uniqueness of the hash increases, but the amount of time of calculation is also increases. So let's go with this one. Here also we see the round costs. So let's go with the 10. So this will be creating an hashed password. Since this is an async, we will again get it with the then. Let's say it will be passing us the hash, and in this then function, then we can call user create. But we are not going to pass the request, but this time we will create a new user object. Let's say we have user and username to be request body username, and email request body email, and password will be the hash we generated for this password. And instead of passing the request body, we are going to pass user to our model. So it will be saving this object to database. So saving it. So all tests are passing. In this user creation part, we can use other JavaScript functionalities. What we are doing here is just taking each field from the request body one by one and assign it to this user. But alternatively, we can have a user object like this one. Let's say user is, and we are going to call object assign, and we will add the basis of the object. It's going to be an empty object. Then we will add request body to it. Then we will add password field with hash. So even the request body has the password, the next one coming from this object will be overwriting this one. So if you go with this way, it would also work, saving it. And we have also one more alternative. Again, commenting this one out. Instead of using this object assign, we can create an object, and we can copy the values coming from the request body with spread operator. This is called a spread operator triple dot, then request body. So this will be taking all the fields like username, email, and adds to this user object. And then we can overwrite password with the hash. So we have this parsing error. It's coming from ESLint. We will fix it. But we will be using this version of creating object. So let's fix the linting error first. In ESLint config, we will be replacing this ECMA version with 6.2.2018. After saving this one, now the error is gone. And saving this test, sometimes this couple of saves are conflicting each other and it can lead crash to tests. So running the tests once again. We are having a problem with the database file access. We will be providing a solution to this one, but for now, for a temporary solution, let's remove the here database SQLite. It's also opened here, so it's gone now. And running the test again, the application will be initialized and it will be creating the database here. Here we see tests are passing. So let's open the database once more to make sure the passwords are here. We see the passwords are encrypted here with bcrypt algorithm. TDD has 3 steps. First, we write our test. Second, we do the implementation that fixes the test. And then we do refactor. It is one of the crucial parts to keep our code clean and reusable. So we are going to refactor our implementation now. First, we are going to move this implementation out of the app.js. This is user-related operations. So we are going to create a user router JS under user folder. We will require express and we will have router from express router. Now let's copy this part here, the app and the user and bcrypt. We are not using them in app.js anymore. So moved this required and the implementation. Now we are going to define this post with router instead of this app. Let's correct this part. And we will export this router. And in app.js, we will have user router require user router, and we will use it in this application like this. We will call app use user router. So let's save all these changes. Our test is failing because we just copied and pasted here, but these required path is wrong. Now the user is at the same folder with the user router. Saving it again. And all tests are passing. Now here we have multiple promise. We are using promise here for this password hashing. Then we use the promise here for the user create part. Now instead of using promise, we can use another JavaScript feature, async await. So let's do that. First, we have to define this function, this callback function we have here for this route with async. Then inside this function, we can use await to wait for the result of these operations. Let's say we will wait for hash by calling this bcrypt hash. Now we don't need this then part. So we will be receiving the hash, then we will be creating a user. Now we are going to call the user create here we can call user create await, and that's it. And then we can return our response back. So with this way, the code flow is more clear and understandable. So saving it. So all tests are still passing. Now let's add one more layer to our application. Now our router is handling this password encryption and handling the database connection parts. Now let's move this implementation another module, and that module will be dealing with our business logic. So let's create user service JS. So user service will be handling our user related business logic. Now here, for now, let's just export an empty object. We will fill that in a bit. And let's get the user service, and we will require it user service. Now what we are going to do here is we will call user service. For now we don't have it, but let's assume we have it. There is save method, save function, and we will pass the request body. And since it is going to be doing the things like we did here, in async await way, we will wait for it to be doing what it's supposed to do. And let's cut this part out, and in user service let's have save function, and this will be async, and it will be taking the body, and let's paste the implementation. Now we are not using the user and bcrypt here, so cutting it from user router and pasting it here, and instead of getting the body through request, now we can just get it like this. And let's export this save function from this module. So saving all changes, and the tests are still passing. So here in user router, this user save is pointing to our save function we have here. So we added extra layers to our implementation, and since we have the tests are integration tests, which are not focusing to our implementation but more focusing on whole application behavior, we are free with our implementation. We can move the implementation from one module to another. Now let's also refactor our tests. In these tests, we have been repeating most of the post operations. So instead of doing it in each test, let's create a function here. Let's call it post valid user, and it will be just copying this part. It will be returning the result back for this application post request. And here in this test, instead of running the same thing, we just call post valid user, then we will get the response, then we expect this part. And let's repeat same thing for the others. Post valid user, and for the next one, and for the other one, and the last one. So repeating part is extracted from each test, so they are more easy to read and understand what they are doing. Saving them, and we see all tests are still passing. And let's make them more readable by using, once again, async await. We use them in our service and router, but we can also use it here. So what we will do here is, first we will define our function is async. Then, instead of going with the then here, we will await for response. Then we can move the expect after this one. Now we are not going to need this done part, so we can just remove it from this test function. Saving this one. So nothing is broken. Let's repeat the same thing for the next test. Removing done, adding async, getting the response with await post valid user, and removing this part. And for the next one, again removing done. And this one we are not going to interested in with the response, so we just call post valid user, and we will wait for the result. And then we are going to get the user list by calling await user find all. Then we expect this user list length to be 1. So removing the rest of it. Saving these two also. So let's make sure nothing is broken in this way. And the next one is also similar to this one. Again, first setting async for the function and removing done, and posting user, listing all users, and getting the saved user, then the saved user's email and password. Same thing for the last test. And all we do here is expect the password not to be equal. Okay. So saving them once more. So all tests are passing. So we refactor our application with a better structure. And also we refactor both our test and application code with more easy to read way by using async await. Now we have this database configuration, and we use this same database both in test and application. Using same database for testing is not right. We have to have a separate database for tests so that we can make sure our tests are running in a predictable environment. So we will add 2 more dependencies to our application. One of them is the config. This is for extracting the configuration to modules. Other dependency is this cross-env. This is a cross-platform environment variable setting library. So let's install them both. We will install the config as a regular dependency. So we run npm install config. And we will install this cross-env as a development dependency. Now let's update our package.json scripts. Now we are running the application with this start script, and we run our test from here. Now we are going to set environment variables for our scripts. So we can use those variables inside our code and decide which database we are going to use or which folders we are going to store data, or those things are going to be decided based on this parameter. So we will use cross-env, and we are going to set the parameter node underscore env. This is all uppercase, and it will be equal to, for this starting the application, let's say it is going to be a development environment. And let's also update the test script with cross-env, again node env equals to, let's say, test. Let's save this. So what is the parameter is about? So in index.js, let's log it. So here, console log. Now we can access that parameter. Let's say env is process env node underscore env. So let's run the application. npm start. So here we see the application is running in development environment. Let's actually move this line to app so that we can see its effect both in the actual start command or the test command. Again, running npm start, and we see our environment is development, and running test, and here we see the console log coming from the app.js. It's the environment of test. So we have a variable that can help us to decide our application logic, or any different configuration can be based on these parameters. Now removing this line. Now we can extract our database configuration, like the database name, username, the other things, to a config object. The config dependency we installed is, by default, looking for a folder in our root directory, which is config. And in this directory, it is looking for these node env variables we are setting. So if we say development, it will be looking for a file in it, development.json. Or let's say we set it to dev, then it will be looking for dev.json. So we have two environments, development and test. So let's create corresponding JSON files under this config folder we just created. So we will have development JSON, and we will have test JSON. Now in this JSON, we will have an object, and we can add anything we want to here. So for now, we have configurations for database. And for that, we have the database name, which was just copying this part. I'm going to add each of them to our JSON file. Don't focus to this error part. So it will be Hoxify, and username is, let's say, my DB user, and password DB pass. Then we will have dialect, which is SQLite, and we have storage, which is database SQLite, and logging, which is false. So we have the configuration object for development. Now let's copy this one and paste to test JSON, and let's replace this storage as test SQLite. So we will be using database SQLite when we are running in development environment. And if we are running in test mode, then we will use the database test SQLite. Now, we have our configuration files. Now let's use it in database. So we will get the config by requiring it. And then we can access the, let's say, we will call it dbconfig, and we get it config get database. So config get will actually mean that config objects database field. We will be getting that part. So we will be getting this part as dbconfig object. And here we can say this is dbconfig database, dbconfig username, dbconfig password, and dbconfig dialect, dbconfig storage, and finally dbconfig logging. Now saving it. So the tests are still passing, and let's look at the folder here. And here we see we have test SQLite. It is created for our tests because they are running. It is creating this. Now let's remove all of them. Removing database, removing test SQLite. Now, if we run the application, we will see the database SQLite here. And if we run the test, we will see the test database here. So we are making sure we use separate databases. For testing environment, it's not a good practice to run tests against a stored database like this one. And here we see our test is crashing because of operational errors against the database file. So SQLite has a special keyword for storage. So we can say colon, then memory, and ends with colon. So removing the test SQLite again. And let's remove the database also. And running the tests. Now we see all tests are passing and we don't see any database file here. This is more suitable for testing. So that's how we configure our application for different environments. We will have 2 more environments added to our application, which are going to be staging and production. And we will see how we can use them to prepare our application to deployment.